Okay, well, look, first of all, thank you all for turning up and coming to listen to some of these product onboarding mistakes. And really what my aim of today is just to show you some of the common mistakes that we see at the product onboarders, as well as Menzur has been kind enough to put his name forward. So I'll be doing a live product onboarding review. It will be a shorter version than what we normally do, but I'll be going through the onboarding experience. And I actually haven't gone through it myself. My colleague has, Helen, my co-founder. So it will actually be the first time that I go through it. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because you'll see me going through it as a brand new user. And the reason why we do a video review is because you'll be able to see our facial expressions as we go through it. But before we do, I just want to explain a little bit more about the product onboarders. And effectively, we are just a very simple service which helps B2B SaaS companies increase visitor to free trial conversion rates and also convert more trial users into customers through product onboarding optimizations. So what we do is we charge $99 and we record a video of us going through the home and pricing page, the sign up process, the first run experience, and then also we look at the onboarding emails that we receive. Helen and I are the co-founders. Helen is a B2B SaaS copywriter. I've been a SaaS marketing and sales person for the last 8 or 9 years. And we've kind of just combined all of our expertise and experience into providing these reviews for B2B SaaS products. I think what's kind of unique about both Helen and I is that we can stand back and act as almost like a completely unbiased user of any product. And we really go through it in the eyes of the user. Now, obviously, different software products have different markets. So there always is going to be a different level of technical competency when it comes to using products. So that's what we try to emulate as we go through the reviews. But really today, I want to share the most common onboarding mistakes that we see. And we've reviewed over 50 product onboarding, SaaS products since June 2020. We actually decided to pull the trigger on this business and launch it because of COVID. We saw that one of the businesses that I run is all about lead research and data enrichment, which is really top of the funnel. And we noticed, or I noticed, that a lot of people were stopping purchasing, and we lost a lot of revenue due to COVID because they didn't want to spend money acquiring customers. But one of the things where Helen and I have always had a strong belief is that there's a lot of work that can be done to improve your conversion rate. So without actually spending any more money on acquiring customers, you can still increase the revenue of your business by improving the onboarding experience and converting more of those visitors to free trial and free trial to paying customers. So the first common mistake that we see, as you'll see in these slides as well, I have a couple of bits of text on the left-hand side and the example of a good example on the right-hand side. I didn't want to be shaming any company that perhaps wasn't doing this right. So the slides will follow this format. So the first thing that we see is very much an unclear, unique value proposition. And what we suggest is that you step back from your business and ask yourself if your UVP would make sense to a stranger. Because essentially that's who your visitors are at this stage. They may not have heard about you. They may have just seen an ad on Facebook or LinkedIn or even through AdWords, and they've just landed on your site. And your UVP should answer 3 questions: what it is, who it's for, and why they should care. And you don't have to go and create a category like Drift to create a really good UVP. And oftentimes the most simple unique value propositions are the best ones. Another thing that we see often, this is still on the website, is inconsistent calls to actions. So you want to ensure that your CTAs on your website are consistent. If the goal, or if your goal is to get somebody to start a free trial, then that should be the main call to action, and it should be consistent throughout. And the example you can see here on Pipedrive is that they've got the same call to action throughout the page. But it's also okay to have secondary calls to actions, and they're very useful for people who are higher up in the buyer's journey. So they might not be ready to start a free trial. So therefore, a video demo or maybe talk to somebody might be a good secondary call to action. But the key is just to keep it consistent. Oftentimes, now we're moving into almost the sign-up process, we see a lot of products have quite painful forms. Every field that you have on a form creates friction and can potentially stop somebody from signing up to your product. So make sure that you only collect the form fields that you need at this stage. You can always collect more data later in your product or in the onboarding experience, but just to get started, get the bare minimum. One of the things I would also say about forms that we really see all the time is around the password field. Now, many of you that have SaaS products will have a specific password character requirement. So it might have to have lowercase, uppercase, numbers, symbols. Make sure that you explain that when somebody is completing the password. One of the first tests I ever do is put in the password 1234. And oftentimes I'll get an error message. Well, that error message could have been resolved by telling me what the password should be or what the password should consist of when I'm signing up. The fourth one, this is a really big one, is around credit card. So if your trial requires a credit card, then just say this up front. If it doesn't require a credit card, also communicate that too. A lot of the products that we look at, we know that the business owner and the product managers and the founders, they know the ins and outs of their product. But your visitors don't. So make sure that you're being explicit with if you need a credit card or not. And because what you want to do is remove the anxiety and hesitation for the user and not surprise them with a credit card field on the sign up form if there was no mention of a credit card before, that will really kill your conversions. So the message here is if you do require a credit card, explain that. If you don't require a credit card, also explain that too. Delayed verification. So this is a slightly bigger consideration, but delayed verification is really a hybrid of verification and login after verification method. So what this means is that users are required to sign up, but are allowed to access or test the app immediately and then verify their email after. And ChargeBee is an example of a company that does this. The reason you want to do this is because the majority of people will have to verify their email. They'll go to their email inbox, and if it's anything like mine, I've got dozens, if not hundreds of unread emails in my updates and promotions folder. And the likelihood is that your onboarding emails will be going into those folders. And it presents an opportunity for the user to be distracted. So what we always suggest is allow people to get into the product, get using it, and let them verify their email at a later time. So personalization is really important when it comes to effective onboarding too. So during the onboarding process, you should really be segmenting your users based on their personas or potentially their objectives. And you can do that by asking questions. As an example here, this one is asking the person what role they are. And then you can use that information to personalize that first run experience for the user to make sure that the onboarding is more relevant to each user. And it also may shorten their time to value. We understand that a lot of products have multiple use cases. So therefore, if your product can serve a few different personas within an organization, just make sure that you're directing the marketer down the marketing route and maybe the product manager down the product manager route as well. We see that this is one thing that isn't often utilized, but can have a huge impact on your conversions too, because again, you're increasing that time to value for the customer. So how am I doing? So not sharing the progress through the onboarding experience can leave users quite confused and unsure of their progress. So you really want to let them know how they are doing. And you can use checklists and progress bars for added gamification, as you can see in this example here. And it's just a really good way for a user to feel like they're actually making progress within the product. And it also helps direct them to that moment of value that you're demonstrating to them in your product as well. So I highly would recommend having checklists and progress bars in your product. So what now? So this is oftentimes when you've signed up, you've gone through the onboarding, the initial questions perhaps, and then you're left with like an empty state. There's just nothing on the dashboard. And we see a lot of products have this issue. And when your product requires data from the user, which might take additional time for that data to be pulled into your product or additional development support, then really you should be showing demo data. And this really is all about helping the user see how your product will look once their data is in there. So like products like Hotjar, for example, where you need to install the JavaScript code on your website, that data doesn't always come through straight away. And maybe the person who's signing up isn't or doesn't have access to that website to implement the code. So make sure that when they are in your dashboard for that first time, they can at least see an example of what the dashboard will look like once they've plugged in their data. Now, it may not just be data. An example could be templates, or example content can also help as well. If you're a task management software, for example, show people an example task. That's a really good example of using some templates and some other content in there just to show people what it looks like. Because again, there was a stat I shared on a few slides before from an Intercom study that says 40 to 60% of users do not return to a software once they start a free trial. So really what you want to do is get the users used to interacting with the product and clicking around and having a bit of a tour of the platform. And like I said, if it requires data, make sure you've got some demo data in there for them. Another thing that we see in the onboarding process is an over-reliance on text and actually sometimes videos. So really, you need to keep in mind that you don't want to make users read too much or watch too many videos to use your product. You can use product tours or tooltips, a little bit like the example here, to guide them through the task or to guide them through the dashboard so they have an understanding of what each component part of the dashboard is. And you need to remember that different people consume content in different ways. So you'll need to use different formats. So that could be video, text, videos, text, guides, or even like a demo. But just make sure that you're creating the onboarding experience for multiple types of people and their different learning styles. In personal emails, we're actually quite surprised by this. My background is actually marketing automation, so I spent a lot of time setting up tech stacks for companies from a sales and marketing point of view. It is to just put in a merge tag when it comes to an onboarding email, but we often see a lot of onboarding emails not using those merge tags. And typically, if a user has signed up, you'll likely have collected their first name. So ensure that you use their first name in the onboarding emails, as well as sending the emails from a team member, not like support@yourdomain.com. We also see a lot of onboarding emails come from a no reply address, which is quite a bad experience for an individual. If they have a question about your product, you really want them to be able to ask that question. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it will scale. However, you want that, especially if in the early stages, you want that interaction with your users. So what we recommend is that you always allow replies to onboarding emails to help users contact you with those questions. So behavioral triggers is another key part of the onboarding experience. And by not sending behavioral-based triggers, depending on the usage of the product, is really detrimental to people experiencing the value of it. You can use behavioral triggers to prompt users to return to your product and also to complete the necessary steps. And we understand that oftentimes there are multiple steps that people need to take in order to experience the true value of your product. So make sure that you have these behavioral-based triggers in there. And it's really important if you need your user to connect a third party, so like connecting it to their WordPress website or inviting a team member to see the value in your product. You want to be tracking the fact that whether this team member has been invited but hasn't logged in, and then you want to encourage them to take action and prompt their own team member to log in. Because again, the whole point of onboarding is to get them to experience the value of the product. Lastly, for now, this is a question that we often get asked quite a lot is how long should my free trial length be? And the length of time for a free trial should really be as long as it needs to be for a user to see the value in the product. So really the answer is make it longer if it needs to be. 30 days, for example, is appropriate if there's a lot to learn or it takes a while to experience value. The example here is Hootsuite, which I'm sure some of us are familiar with. Hootsuite offer a 30-day free trial. But when you think about having a free trial for 30 days in a product like Hootsuite, Hootsuite, for those that don't know, is a social media management and scheduling tool. So really they offer quite a long trial so that you can actually schedule you can connect your social media accounts and then schedule posts to be posted and published across those channels. The more you do that, the more in advance that you schedule your posts, the more that you see the value of the product. If they only offered a 7-day free trial, it's very unlikely that somebody would experience the true value of Hootsuite because they'll only be scheduling maybe 1 or 2 social media posts, for example. So the longer the trial with high activation rates can create a very, very sticky product. And it's the reasons why when consumer apps such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Spotify, they typically give 30 days free trial because they want you to be sticky within the product. So if you start using Spotify and you create playlists and you listen to those playlists on a daily basis, there's a higher chance of you as a user upgrading to premium, especially if you want to skip the ads. So the lesson here is that you could read so many different blog posts about free trial length. However, the most important thing to remember is make it as long as it needs to be for the user to find the value. So those are 12. I could probably go on and give a few more examples of different common mistakes that we see, but those are the main mistakes that we see.